We'll get you back inside the courtroom in just a moment. But first, joining us to discuss is National Trial Attorney Michael Jaafar. Always great to have you on with both of us, Michael. Let me ask you this, because I'm getting a little, I feel like the prosecutor's just going on for too long, is using a tone that can be a little bit patronizing, using a lot of big words. I just think that he's going to be irritating the jury if he's not careful.
I'm glad you asked that. When I was watching that cross-examination, I was thinking of the tale of two careers, right? The career of the defense attorney and the prosecutor. When you're a defense attorney, you hold your breath every time your client opens their mouth in court. But when you're the prosecutor, and this is to your point, Judge Ashley, when you're the prosecutor, your career sometimes is made if you have an effective cross-examination. Every prosecutor I've ever talked to, they say they don't sleep the night before they're about to cross-examine a defendant, because it's different to cross-examine a defendant than to cross-examine, let's say, an expert or a witness. So when you cross-examine a defendant, you could make your career, but what most people don't know is you could actually ruin your career. You could ruin your career if you have an ineffective cross-examination of a defendant. Just think about it. If you're a prosecutor, you're a competitive person by nature. For you to become a prosecutor as opposed to like an associate at a transaction law firm, you're very competitive. And so if you have an ineffective cross-examination, or if you let a defendant off the hook, because what if this Morales guy did this? What, I mean, he's innocent until proven guilty, but what if he did it? The cross-examination of the prosecutor is not effective, and he lets him off the hook. That's going to be terrible. I do agree with you. He was a little bit patronizing. He was a little bit abrasive. He didn't get the answers he wanted on some of the points, but he had the possibility of having a very effective cross-examination. I still think it was good, but it could have been better.
Mike, what's your take on sarcasm by prosecutors or anyone doing a cross-examination?
Good question.
I wonder, because the sarcasm that he's been using, he's used it a couple of times, really has fallen flat. It doesn't look like the defendant's getting it, right? He's not getting it. And you got to wonder if the jury's getting it, and if it makes him seem like a bully. I don't know. What's your take on sarcasm?
Michael, I'm glad you brought that up. You know, some of the most successful criminal defense attorneys were theater majors. They were actors, right? Jeff Feiger, a lot of people, they were theater majors. They have tone. It's very hard. You have to be very talented to have a proper tone and control a conversation. We've seen defense attorneys, prosecutors who really control a courtroom with the way they do in their cadence. Some of them don't have it, but it's contrived. So what you're saying is this: his sarcasm came off as contrived. If it wasn't contrived, if it was properly placed, if the defendant deserved it, then it would have been well placed. So to answer your question, it comes down to the juror who's listening to this. You might have a juror who has some PTSD from a sarcastic high school teacher, and they don't like it. It's very risky when you're sarcastic. He could have really just hit the points without the sarcasm. Hey, you drove basically a few hours. You didn't have any incident. Well, what's your point with the PCP? He could have done that and set himself up for a good closing argument. But I think he went he's just not a talented prosecutor. Let's just be honest. He was not talented. His oratory is not a talented type of oratory. You
know, Michael, I don't think there's any place for sarcasm in front of a jury in court.
I would agree. I think it's taking chances you don't need to take. You know what I mean? And especially, like you said, in this instance where whatever the defendant is saying, he wasn't getting it. And so it just didn't look good.
Yeah,
you know
I agree.
What I mean?
I think it's a terrible look.
All right, folks, before we go back to court, I want to bring back in our guest, National Trial Attorney Michael Jaafar. And Michael, I want to ask you about baby Vanessa. It's an interesting fact in this case that she's not been found. There's really no evidence of foul play as far as she's concerned, other than the fact that she's not been found. There's no blood evidence, no DNA, anything to suggest something happened to her. And I gotta feel like on some level, this adds some credibility to what he's talking about here, or it's very possible he gave her away in order to pay off some debt he had sitting out there. Who knows? People do that kind of craziness all the time. But yet and still, the fact that there's no evidence of what happened to this child, I wonder if that somehow is going to be an issue for this jury.
I think it's going to be, and you know, I'm glad you bring that up, because here's what I say about cases like this. This is why the jury system is so important, and this is why I always say we put a lot on our jurors. Think about it. At the end of this case, they're going to have to go back into the room and debate whether there's only two universes we live in. There's a universe where he didn't do this and he's telling the truth, or the other universe is where he did do it and he's lying. Nobody really knows. We're going to ask this jury to basically call a ball or a strike on this. And they're going to have to know which universe we live in beyond a reasonable doubt. And the baby Vanessa is going to come into this. This is a big deal, by the way. If it was just a murder of his ex-girlfriend, that would be one thing. I'm not saying it would be an easy case, but it would be a completely different thing for the jury. But maybe what they'll do is they'll just latch onto the fact that she hasn't been found, and hey, maybe if we convict him and she's found later on, he has new evidence and he'll be able to get her. Either way, it's terrible decision that the jury's going to have to make, and maybe Vanessa's going to really take this to another level of complexity. So I do agree with you.
Everybody wonders where baby Vanessa is. Let's bring back in Michael Jaafar. Weigh in, Michael, and we've reported everything we know at this moment. What are your thoughts?
I think Geragos is upset about the fact, my 2 cents is that he's probably upset about the fact that Nathan Hochman can't even ask to postpone or withdraw the resentencing motion. By California law, once it's filed by any DA, then it becomes the judge's decision and only the judge's decision. And I think Geragos is upset at the fact that he pretty much is sure that Nathan Hochman is doing a political thing to show his constituents that, hey, you know what, I don't want this any more than anybody else does, because he ran on a campaign of, law and order, and part of his platform was this is in line with his brand to oppose the Menendez withdrawal. But it's really black and white that he cannot try to cancel or stop this process. It's up to the judge. I think Geragos is upset about that, and I think he's doing a good job by shedding light on what he thinks is biased. But it's okay for him to be biased. He's allowed to be biased. He's not a judge. He's not a jury. He's supposed to be biased. But I think this is just a dogfight between Geragos and Hochman. I think it's going to be very interesting and entertaining.
Yeah, and I agree. I think he has a right to express an opinion, and what he's done up to this point, Michael, is he's had a number of press conferences where he's laid out his reasons why. And I think the number one he points to is the fact that he doesn't feel they've been rehabilitated, which he thinks is an important part of this resentencing process. You look at what they've done in jail, various things that they've been involved in to improve themselves and others, but also this idea that they've been rehabilitated. He doesn't believe they have been. Now, again, this is not about relitigating the case. There's a guilty verdict that's going to stand. It's about a resentencing. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think he mentioned the Netflix documentary. He mentioned social media in the lead up to this. He obviously hates the fact that these guys are even getting a fair shake or even a shot at getting out. He has mentioned that there are many people in jail for the same crime or even a lesser crime, and they don't even have the chance to get out of jail, and he hates that. He disputes that, and he's not supposed to be unfair. He's not supposed to be impartial. He's supposed to be biased. That's what he's elected to do, is to be biased. So he has an opinion. He's going to fight like a dog to keep these guys in jail. He does not want the verdict or the sentence to be disturbed. He does not want it. He's allowed to have that opinion. He's going to fight like tooth and nail to do that, just like Geragos is fighting on the other side.
Well, and I can tell you something we've learned about the hearing on May 9th. This just in, that hearing is not only on the motion to recuse the DA that was filed by Geragos, who represents the brothers, but also for the court to determine whether or not that report is admissible. So now it makes sense to put both of those together. Makes perfect sense to me by the court. Let's talk, though, about the brutality of this crime. And the reason I want to do that is to go back to the original what happened in this case, because Michael said earlier, and I agree, the resentencing isn't about what happened during the course of the crime, but rather how they've done after. But I think you can't help but look back, Michael Jaafar, at the heinous nature of the crime. We only have about 20 seconds left.
It's absolutely a part of it. I completely agree with you. It's a part of it that needs to be considered. If that can't be considered, what can be? Just what they did after the fact. To know what they did after the fact and the value of it, you have to know what they did before the fact and what they're trying to atone for.
And they plan to show some of that information. They've given notice that we're going to show some of those photos and stuff.
And it was a brutal killing of their own mother and father, and just awful circumstances. All right. Thank you, Michael Jaafar, for joining us tonight.